Welcome to the Winning Family Podcast with Rodney and Michelle Gage, a podcast designed to help you build winning relationships in your marriage and with your kids. My name is Dr. Linda Travelute, and I'm your host for the Winning Family Podcast. And we want to say a big thank you to you, our listeners, for joining us. It would mean the world to us if you would subscribe to the podcast, rate it, and review it, and let us know if you find the content helpful and encouraging. And hey, share these episodes with your friends and your family. And at the end, we will share with you how to get a free copy of Rodney's new book, The Double Win. I love that title, The Double Win. It's super helpful. It's going to be a game changer for you, and we want to get a copy to you absolutely free. So today I am joined with Rodney and Michelle Gage, and we're going to talk about making marriage simple. Are you kidding me? Can we make marriage simple?
Easiest thing in the world.
Oh, lay it out.
Married? I mean, how hard can that be?
Oh my goodness. I don't know what planet you're from, but break it down, Rodney Gage. Break it down.
It's kind of like my son Luke. We always tease about, I said, hey, aren't you going to write that book on humility and different ways you obtained it? But, it's one of those things where, it is, I don't even know if that's even a fair title, Marriage Made Simple. But I'll tell you how it all came about, though. I'm going to make a little confession here. I'll tell the story.
Oh, I can't wait.
Ooh.
So Michelle and I had a date night at home. And so I am, if you look up the word idiot in the dictionary when it comes to technology, you'll see my face there because I'm just like seriously clueless about technology. I don't.
Do they have one of those books, Technology for Dummies?
I don't know, but I wouldn't
do.
even be able to figure it out.
We'll get one for them.
Yeah.
But one night we're sitting on the couch, and so we decided we're going to watch a movie. And so we have one of these so-called smart TVs, which is the dumbest thing ever. So we have the smart TV, and so on the remote, it has across the top, it's got like Netflix, it's got Amazon, it's got, I don't know, whatever other big, button on there. And so we were told by our kids and some friends, say, oh, you got to watch this, certain movie. It's on Amazon and whatever. So I'm literally trying to figure out how to get on Amazon. And I probably spent, I don't know how long, probably a solid 15 minutes. I mean, I was getting to the point of just like beside myself. I was so mad, frustrated. Finally we got the customer service number, called Amazon after
the TV company.
Yeah. So anyway, long story short, I'm talking to some guy like in India, okay, who is navigating me in Orlando, Florida, with my remote control.
This was enjoyable to watch on the couch.
This is our date night. And so this guy goes, do you have your remote control? I said, yes. He said, push the button. I said, what button? Like there's 50 buttons on the remote control. He said, push the button. I said, which button? He said, do you see a button that says Amazon? I said, yes. He said, push the button. I pushed the button, and all of a sudden, this little thing starts spinning on the TV. And all of a sudden, our world was expanded with endless movie selections.
Now, the story has a few more details to it than that.
Oh.
But we had pushed the Amazon button, but we had not pushed it in the correct order with other buttons.
Okay.
That's true.
Well, bottom line point of the story, how all this has anything to do with Marriage Made Simple is that it's amazing how something so simple can be made complicated.
Yes.
And I think that is what happens with many couples. We are prone, to take something that God created, something good, something purposeful. God created marriage for our enjoyment, one man, one woman coming together. That's God's plan. That's God's design. I know some may not agree with that, but that's God's plan. That's his design. That is his purpose. If anybody should know, he should know. He's the author, he's the creator, he's the inventor. So he invented marriage. And so one man, one woman, leave mother and father. And what did he say? Cleave to each other and become one flesh. So it sounds simple, right? But it's not very easy. It's very, very complicated.
Even
it's
from
very
the
messy.
very beginning.
Yes.
The very first couple.
Right.
It was complicated.
That's right.
So anyway,
Yeah.
they blew it, and then they went and hid. Well, they blamed each other, and then they went and hid and put fig leaves over themselves. So
if
anyway,
we struggle,
yes,
it's a reality that everyone struggles. It's not easy.
Yeah.
right. And we certainly want to make light of anybody who's obviously going through struggles right now in their marriage. The point of the matter is I think we contribute a lot to the complications of marriage.
Mm-hmm.
We get in the way of ourselves a lot of times. And as a result, we can make something good that God intended to become, in many ways, disappointing and hurtful. And we can not only complicate matters, but when you think about the repercussions of choices that we make too. So unfortunately, there are consequences to the flip side of that when things don't go well, or we end up dissolving a relationship, a marriage ends, divorce happens, life gets complicated, life gets messy, that affects, there's a ripple effect, on so many different areas of life. So how do we avoid the complicated? Mm-hmm. How do we keep the main thing? How can we simplify, something that, again, is hard? It's very difficult. But I think if we look to God and we follow his ways and we really lean on God's plan and purposes, we can avoid, avoid a lot of the pitfalls and traps that, we find ourselves falling into, and we don't have to get lost, in the confusion of it all. I think God can help us see from his perspective, and I think he can help us see clearly when we're really able to understand that God has a plan and a purpose. So as long as we comply with that and we are cooperative when it comes to doing that, then I think we can make marriage simple in a way that brings joy and fulfillment to our lives. And we can really win in the marriage relationship.
That's right. We bring a few years of marriage to the table here. That's right. Right? So, Linda, you and Ted have been married 30 years. 30 years. We both got married all of us got married in the same year. Yep. So we bring 30 years, almost 31. So right here, we got 60 years right here at the table. So we have not always kept it simple, but it sure is awesome when we do. And so we get to talk about that. How are some steps? What are some
Amazon
steps
too.
we can do?
So I love a statement you made. You said, okay, so the whole idea here is that you're going to make marriage simple, and you're going to outline that for us. But simple doesn't mean easy. Yeah. Simple doesn't mean easy. So let's break it down. What are the simple steps, maybe not easy steps, but what are the simple steps that you would recommend?
Well, first and foremost, I like to say it this way. We have to learn to love deeper. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people are afraid to go deep in their love. And a lot of that is because of maybe what they either didn't have growing up, or whatever poor models that they were exposed to growing up. And that's not that we're bashing our parents or anything like that. But I think if we didn't see healthy relationships and healthy marriages modeled, then what happens is we come into a relationship sometimes with kind of we're keeping somebody somewhat at arm's length. We like to kind of keep things superficial because that's where it's safe. And the problem is that when we put up our guard, or we won't allow our spouse, in other words, there's only so far we're going to allow them into our lives, where mentally, emotionally, if we hold back, what happens is that we're not able to really experience the true oneness at the different levels that God intended, spiritually, emotionally, physically, just mentally, all of those areas of life where we come together as one. Well, if we're not loving at a deeper level, then, we're holding back, we're limiting the relationship. And if the relationship somewhat becomes more conditional rather than unconditional. And so it's like, I'll love you if you do X, Y, and Z, or if you meet certain needs, or if you live up to certain expectations. And so what happens is that we have a tendency, if somebody doesn't live up to those expectations, then we're quick to point blame. We're quick to point out, the discrepancies of the person that we married. And all of a sudden, what is no longer a deep, transparent, intimate relationship, now everything is on the surface. Everything's being protected. Everything is guarded because we tried to maybe open up. We tried to be transparent, but we got met with rejection or criticism or ridicule. So as a result, we kind of just keep it safe. And I think that's where, when we can learn to go deeper in our love, and what I mean by that, that's really just learning to love unconditionally, without expecting anything in return. And I know that sounds kind of weird and strange, when we say not expecting anything in return, but that's truly living sacrificially, unconditionally, exactly the way God modeled, especially through what he did through his son, Jesus Christ, in our lives as believers, as married couples, when it comes to our relationship with God and how he plays that role in our lives as well. So that's kind of what
that's really good. I think we've talked about before too, when we first got married, you bring so many expectations into a relationship, and when they are not met, which they will not be met, because we have very unrealistic expectations based upon the way that we were raised, based upon what we've allowed the culture to teach us about what we think marriage is. And when those aren't met, then, like you said, we're building walls and we don't allow people to come in close to us, then we can easily become angered and shut walls down. And which so love deeply leads to the second thing that we're going to talk about, and that is forgive quickly. And the Bible teaches us not to allow the sun to go down on our wrath. And I was talking to a friend about that recently there, and she was like, it takes me a long time to process my anger. I can't, it's hard for me to say, if we're arguing, not to go to sleep and completely finish the argument because I'm so tired. I can't process and work all the way through it before the sun has gone down. And that made sense to me. It was interesting, but I think it's just forgiving, living and walking, forgiving quickly. We may have to walk through and process things, that where those expectations have not been met. And maybe, we talked about this before, where you have to write a note and try to work it all out in your own mind, process it. But living in this constant state of forgiveness, the Bible says to make allowance for people's faults, because we all are imperfect, know. I'll be the first to admit I'm imperfect. So we have to expect that people will not meet our expectation. So we have to make allowance for that. And a part of that is being willing to forgive quickly. And of course, this is something I have to remind myself of. But I think the whole thought of going to sleep, forgiving, not holding that, allowing the sun to go down, but continuing to work through things, Yeah.
Another way of saying that is just keeping short accounts.
Yeah.
So you're not allowing a point of conflict to just drag on, where you're giving each other, the silent treatment, where you're not even speaking to each other for days. Because what happens, the Bible says, don't give the devil a foothold. If you give him an inch, he's gonna invade your privacy real quick. because he'll literally come in and take over. He's come to steal, kill, and destroy. He's just looking for a way in. And he'll use anger, hurt, disappointment. He'll use all of those things because he knows if he can get in and create a wedge to create distance, that cold shoulder, that awkwardness, you can just feel the tension in the air. If he can create that kind of atmosphere in the home, he knows that he's got you. And that's why we've got to keep those short accounts and make allowance. That's such a I love that. That is such a powerful verse of scripture where we have to just understand that we're all imperfect. We're going to say things we shouldn't have said. We're going to say things we later regret. We will often act out in ways that, if we're not careful, can hurt the other person. And when somebody is on the receiving end of being hurt, well, we can either hold that in or we can explode and retaliate to try to defend ourselves. But all of that just adds fuel to the fire. And I think it's one of the reasons why, Paul even said that we are to be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. And I think if we just would learn to just pause and just listen more, I think a lot. We have this in our family shift book, but it's a statement that says the biggest distance, the farthest distance between two people is misunderstanding. And so when you
powerfully true.
And so when you think about the distance, the gap, the separation that can happen in a marriage relationship, a lot of it really comes back down to the misunderstandings. It's those unmet expectations. And so that's where we have to just, love deeper, open up, speak, where we can be vulnerable and speak the truth in love. We can take off the mask and we can share our hurts, our struggles, where it's not being met by ridicule or criticism or judgment. And then on top of that, when we can keep those short accounts and we can say, hey, I was wrong, not I'm sorry, I was wrong for saying that. I was wrong for neglecting, you, or I was wrong for not thinking, more about, or just being considerate, of something as opposed to just focusing on myself.
I love a statement that my dad used to say, and Linda, you may be able to tell me who said it, but to seek to understand before being understood. And that, since my dad's passing, that has been a statement that's really kind of been heavy on my heart, just to seek to understand before being understood, because we've talked about this before too. We can tend to have the addiction to always being right, and to come into a relationship or into an argument or into just your home in itself to understand why the person is acting that way, why they're so frustrated. Maybe they're just exhausted, and to understand that and kind of look beyond why, or look beyond the surface of the behavior to what is behind the behavior right now. What is going on? Why are they acting that way?
I heard someone define the word intimacy one time, which was so powerful, because at the end of the day, it's what we all want. It's what we all desire in a relationship. But what does really intimacy mean? And they said it this way: it's intimacy is defined, into me you see. And so when we can, allow the other person to see into our lives, where they have a better perspective and understanding of what it is we're going through, what we're feeling, what happened to us. Sometimes we just need to have that safe place where we can go and share our heart with somebody, and without, again, being met with condemnation or sarcasm or somebody kind of just brushes it off, but willing to listen and to empathize and enter into your world and feel what you feel. And what that just builds trust, and it builds greater intimacy and allows you to love deeper. And so keeping those short accounts, and then of course, choosing joy. I think that's the third thing that's so important, is just learning to understand that at the end of the day, we are responsible, for our attitude. And regardless of what's going on or how somebody else is acting or choosing to respond, we're going to choose to respond. We're just going to choose joy no matter what. And when we take that approach, it's amazing how, we're in control of the circumstances rather than allowing the circumstances to control our moods and emotions.
Again, simple but not easy.
Not
right.
easy. Not easy. Not easy.
Absolutely.
But it is a choice.
Push the joy button because that one works. Trust me.
Remember, Rodney, when you push that Amazon button, and remember, we're choosing joy. Push that joy button.
So you've given us 3 great steps so far as to making marriage simple. First of all is love deeply, forgive quickly, choose joy. And what's the 4th one?
First one is to live intentional.
Well, our favorite word on this podcast, intentional.
Right. Intentional. Life is short. Live intentional. Life is long. Stay encouraged.
Yeah.
We've got to live each moment, each day, intentionally. It's life is a gift, and each moment we've got to be intentional. So we have to decide and determine, do we want to have a great marriage? Then we got to do some things.
Right,
it's not all on our spouse to give us a great marriage,
right.
And it's not all their responsibility. It's not 50-50. It's 110 and 110 on each part. So we got to be intentional about that.
And there's a difference between having good intentions and being intentional.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
So
that's true.
we can have good intentions of, a date night, or good intentions of doing something with the family, good intentions of, going to church or whatever. But the question is, are we being intentional with that? Are we building our schedule? Are we, around the things that we say are important? So, that's, I think what Stephen Covey once said, you don't plan out your priorities. No, you decide your priorities and then you put them you put them on your calendar. Mm-hmm. So, it's a matter of being intentional and saying, these are the things that are most important to me. My marriage, beyond, obviously if you're married, you're listening to this, I'm even going to say this. This is controversial. And so I'm going to stir the pot here.
Disclaimer.
Okay. Let me just say this. If you're watching this or if you're listening to this, if you are married and you have children, let me just speak a word of truth and love here. Okay. Listen, if you have kids, they are not number one.
Right.
Your spouse is number one. Your kids are number 2.
This is huge.
Ultimately, that's probably not even accurate. God is number 1. I'm stating the obvious here, okay? He's number 1. He should be number 1. But your spouse should be the highest and most important priority before your children. And I think that's the great danger and trap that a lot of young couples with small children fall into, that once those kiddos get into the picture, they compete for the time and the attention and the focus of the husband and wife.
They become the CEO of the household sometimes.
Absolutely. So they're calling the shots. They dictate, everything.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, if I've heard it once, I've heard it 100 times from a young couple, and they say, well, we can't go out because our children, they just don't enjoy staying with a babysitter. I'm like, well, who gives a flying rip about get the babysitter over there and get out the door and go enjoy your night. They'll still be alive when you get home. So it's just little things like that. You have to be intentional and fight for the things that are most important, because if you don't, life happens. Mm-hmm. We get busy. And again, we can have good intentions. And then we look back and we say, we hadn't been on a date in 2 years. We haven't gone on a vacation. And we haven't just had time in a getaway. And, so all of a sudden, again, what we hoped or what we had good intentions would happen doesn't sometimes happen unless we are intentional about it.
That's something that we really tried to do. And we had family night too, which was really important, but also date nights and put those rocks on the calendar. I know that you and Ted do that as well, Linda, even still.
Absolutely.
You know, with we're empty nesters, and you still have to keep that as a priority because these are simple things, but they're not easy. Even as empty nesters, our schedules can fill up so fast. So do you have some tips for that?
Well, you know, you're talking about being intentional and going back to some of the previous podcast episodes that we've recorded, we talked about determining in advance, if possible, or just start where you are. What are our core values? What's our vision? What's our mission? And for Ted and I, that was one of them. You talk about date nights. We determined that we would have a date night every week. Come hell or high water, a date night every week. And I can honestly say, and you can ask Ted this, we've probably only missed maybe 5 to 10. And we've been married 30 years. And maybe that was due to sickness. Or I think I was in the hospital giving birth to a child one weekend. But it can be as, you know, and people will say, well, we don't have the money to go out. Well, you don't need money. You can go for a walk at the lakefront or go for a bike ride or, like you say, stay in and try to fiddle with Amazon, right? Or, you know, whatever. But so that was one of the commitments we made, is to have a weekly date night. And we have kept that. And that it has helped us keep our marriage priority. And even when the kids were in school and had conflicting events such as basketball games and you know, different extracurricular activities, we still figured out a way to make that happen, even if that meant our kids didn't sign up for as many things as they wanted to, because mom and dad's relationship came first.
That's countercultural.
It is. And, you know, also another thing, you know, if we want to be practical and give some suggestions as to how you can be intentional, another thing we did was we would have couch time every day when we got home from work. Ted and I both worked outside the home. And when we came home, you know, it's typical when dad walks in the door or whoever's last to walk in, the kids are saying, hey, daddy, and they want the attention of that person that just walked in. But our kids knew that as soon as mom and dad got a moment, whoever walked in the door last, they would go to the couch. And we would both sit on the couch for 15 minutes.
Wow.
And that would be mom and dad's time to catch up and debrief. They were not allowed to interrupt us. If they did try, if they needed us, or if the kitchen was on fire, we'd say, look, this is our couch time, guys, and this is mom and dad's time to catch up. And we would just debrief about the day. Hey, is there anything that happened that was upsetting? Is there anything? What were the highlights of your day? Not just how was your day? Open-ended questions, and just for 15 minutes. But that not only gave us that intentional time to connect, but it also said volumes to our kids that, hey, this relationship between mom and dad comes before us.
You taught by example.
But
yeah, that is wonderful.
But what's cool about that is, you know, some parents might think, well, that makes your kids feel insecure. No, it doesn't. It makes them know that your marriage is rock solid. That's what brings security to a family, to a home. So being intentional,
that's so good. That we did something similar, but it was putting the kids to bed at an early moment. Even maybe they didn't go to sleep, but they went in their rooms and they shut their doors, and then it was our time, you know, to be together at that moment. And they would fight it.
Yeah.
Luke was one that would crawl out of his crib, and we turned the locks on the doors. I know that's crazy, and it's probably, I don't know, is it illegal?
That's awesome.
But we would lock him in. You're staying in that room, and then we would have time together.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So as we wrap this up today, the 4 things that you suggest that make marriage simple. Number 1 is love deeply. Number 2 is forgive quickly. 3 is choose joy. And then 4, live intentionally.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to add to that as we close this out today?
Well, I don't want to complicate matters. We want to keep it simple.
Okay. I love it.
No, I think that's the issue, is just keep the main thing the main thing.
Yeah.
You know, if we could just focus on those 4 things, wow, what a game changer that would be. And so hopefully that will be a winning strategy that you can apply, in your given context. And we trust that if anything, it will be something for you to just kind of refocus on.
Yeah, that's right. That's so good.
Again,
and
just
I know,
keep it
Linda,
simple.
you're going to tell our listeners how they can get a copy of Rodney's new book. But his new book, The Double Win, speaks just to these things.
Awesome.
So maybe we can tell them how to get that.
Absolutely. I'll do that right now. So we want to thank you for joining us. Obviously, it is a passion. You can tell in their voices, right? They are passionate about pouring into you, as I am. And we want to encourage you to follow this podcast on Facebook and Instagram. We want to hear from you. We want your questions. And here it is. This is how you get the book. You ready? You're going to write this down. If you're driving, pull over. It'll be worth your time. You want to go to thedoublewinclub.com. That is how you can receive your free copy of The Double Win, the new book by Rodney Gage. And you'll also get something else, which I think is just phenomenal. I just love that you guys are offering this. You're going to have the opportunity to join their mentoring club called the Double Win Club for 30 days free. Free. Isn't that cool? Free. So go to thedoublewinclub.com to learn more about Rodney and Michelle's family mentoring program. And again, we want to encourage you to just have it in your heart to win at home and win at life. And we're here to help you do that.
Awesome. Thank you.